Well, just like you, I'm pretty much just, I guess, another boy in Canada, I guess.
Another boy in Canada. That's a good one.
Yeah, like so I did my
All right, Fahim, good to have you here. I wanted to do this in a different setting where we were face to face, doing it in person, but we are in a different world now, and that's not possible. And I thought better doing this than nothing. I have known you for quite a while,
oh,
but you are a guest in my show today, and I'll get to know you. But before we go there, I want to know about your beard. How do you take care of it? What is your grooming? What do you do to keep it groomed and looking
I
as it is?
I actually don't do anything. I just share it from time to time. Also, like, thank you for having me. It's nice to do something like this. I guess it's gonna hopefully it will help some people. But as far as my beard goes, I don't
Yeah.
think I can help
And
because it is short.
I'm sure you don't keep it just like that.
It is
What kind
it is.
of beard oil, some kind of products? How do you keep it in shape? Keep the
I just
on?
I just trim it from time to time. That's about it. Like
All right.
yeah, basically I learned it in a salon. Like I used to use a trimmer before, but then the guy used scissors to like shape it the way it is looking right now. I was like, oh yeah, I can just use the scissors, and then it's everything's been history since then.
All right. Lovely, lovely. So let us get to know Fahim a little. Tell us a little about you, so my viewers have a clear understanding of who you are, what you're doing in Canada right now, and then we can go into the
All
details.
right. Well, just like you, I'm pretty much just, I guess, another boy in Canada, I guess.
Another boy in Canada. That's a good one.
Yeah, like so I did the most traditional path. I went the most traditional path as far as my education goes. I did my O levels, my A levels back in Dhaka. After that, I wanted to for further education, I wanted to study somewhere and something that I enjoyed.
Hmm.
And that brought me here in Canada. I graduated like exactly about a year ago, and I've been working ever since in Toronto. And yeah, currently I'm in the middle of a pandemic, so that's about it.
So yeah, coming back, you were saying you came to Canada and finished your graduation. Now you're working. So tell me about when you came to Canada. When was that?
I came to Canada back in to be specific, on August 14.
Hmm.
My university was start in September, so I just arrived like about a week before September started, roughly.
Uh-huh.
So I studied computer science. I
Hmm.
went to the University of Waterloo.
Hmm.
It was a bit of a gamble in the sense that it was just that I was good at math. I had no idea how CS worked, but I was good at math, so I was like, I need a way to monetize this. So CS made
Hmm.
sense, basically.
And I think Waterloo is a very highly rated university for IT. Is it? That's what I hear.
I mean, yeah, it is. It is pretty famous for that.
Hmm.
Their CS, and their engineering departments are like quite famous and quite reputed all over the world. So I just had the privilege and the bit of luck to get there.
Yeah, and I'm sure you had an amazing life as a student because I visited your campus, and it's a beautiful place. It's a huge place, and I'm sure studying there was an experience in itself. Apart from the education bit, I mean, to be part of
Absolutely,
the, you know.
absolutely. It was amazing. Like the campus had the right balance between modernization and nature. So everybody got a bit of whatever they wanted. Like there were high facility Mac labs and all that kind of stuff on one hand. There were fancy buildings with all sorts of amazing stuff going on with nanotech and whatnot. On the other
Mhm.
end, you can just get out of the buildings and you had like endless greenery, with some nice places to sit on and have a nice small picnic and
Yeah,
stuff like
actually, I
that.
took some photographs last time I visited your campus. I still have those photos, and the greenery is amazing. It was so green.
Yeah, yeah, it's an amazing place, but
Yeah.
you
So
can't
yeah, while the fact is that it's a beautiful place to stay and all that, I'm sure you had certain challenges despite that when you moved in.
Oh yes, of
So,
course.
what were the challenges that you would like to, make someone
Um,
aware who's coming from, similar situation, who's coming here to study this year or next year?
Right.
What did you tell them to prepare themselves?
I mean, like the first thing I would say academically is like, I guess it would make sense to get a bit of an idea of what you're studying. Like, especially for someone like me, I had barely written a line of code before I moved to university. And
Hmm.
especially at my place, like in my university, there I had friends, roommates, dorm mates, basically like, who are, I had this one guy like, who was finishing writing a book and he was a classmate of mine.
All right.
And me being like a person who never wrote code basically is competing against him.
Hmm.
So especially like in the first 2 3 months, I really had some trouble like catching up with my peers.
So
um,
would you say the course in itself is challenging? Because there's a saying that goes, people from the subcontinent, they actually study a lot harder, they're a lot more hardworking, or they face more adversity during their studies, so they're more drilled and prepared to take on than say people studying in North America. What's your view? The
uh,
university level, would you say, what kind of challenges did you face, academically speaking?
Academically speaking, like in my case, it wasn't a matter of like working harder or whatever. It was just not knowing what I'm heading for, and
Hmm.
versus the standard that's set there, like that was the bigger issue. Like
Hmm.
I eventually was able to catch up with my friends, so I don't think like like a matter of like being hardworking or talented doesn't come into question. It
Hmm.
was basically about the preparedness. Like all I was good at was math, and I did as good as my peers in the math courses in my first year. But as far as the CS courses went, like the teacher would kind of go at their pace. Well, not at their pace, but I was at the lower end of the average, and my friends are at the upper end. So it
Then
was
they knew
like
more about computer science than you did.
exactly. Like I didn't
And
even
what kind of knowledge are you talking about? Because you are a pretty tech savvy guy, and so am I. But when you say you didn't really know much about computer science, what kind of knowledge are you talking about?
like the fundamentals. Like now that I talk to you about it after finishing my degree and everything, these are very simple concepts. But at a time when you have like 3 months to like ingest like a huge amount of information and like kind of master it in a way, like
Hmm.
sometimes that can be a bit overwhelming. Like me, like then a few of my friends, we were basically contemplating like whether we chose the right career for ourselves. We all ended up doing pretty well eventually, but
Hmm.
back then like we were really doubtful. Like some of us even like got some application forms to switch majors and stuff.
Interesting. I mean, I'll stop you there. That's a very interesting point you raised. I was going to ask you about that. So you said you're good in math, and you thought computer science would be a good subject. Uh, What else? Like when you decided to apply and come here, did you consider other subjects? How did you basically decide this is what you want to do? I mean, if you can share your frame
Right,
of mind going
right,
back 4 years or 5 years when you
right.
were applying.
Well, like I was never the person who was very good at memorizing things or remembering a lot of facts. I rather was a person like who could kind of play around with logic. So
Hmm.
like so that's pretty much what I focused on.
Hmm.
My other like only noteworthy competition for a career was accounting, and in fact like at least academics wise, I think I was better at accounting than I was at math. Even there was like a
Hmm.
slight margin. It is what it is. Um, I just thought like in accounting came a bit too simply for me, I guess.
Hmm.
So I was like, this seems like a very this felt like grunt work to me at the end of the day.
It
Like
was
it's
dry and sort of
yeah, it
boring
was
sort
like
of a
like
field.
follow a procedure and you're done.
Hmm.
But CS was like well, math and logic was more like, oh, I'm actually getting to massage my brain in a way.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, the reason I'm asking you all this is I know you to be a sort of a very smart student who could have chosen anything. You're not like someone who's like, you have to study something, so you just study to get a degree. But you are actually smart, and you could have picked up so many disciplines, and this is what you chose. So we sort of covered that, and it makes sense. So I'd like to know at this point, why did you choose Canada specifically? Why come to Canada, and why
Hmm.
this university in particular?
Well, first of all, like I guess as all person in my place back then, I decided like what are the kind of things I want to study, right? So the first thing I did was basically go over to Google, search top X in universities for this subject. And so out of these, like, there were places like, the usual ones, the MITs, the Oxfords and the Cambridges and the HKUs and NUSs and whatnot. And obviously Waterloo fell into that as well.
Hmm.
So over there, then I had to like, kind of filter them out. I'm pretty sure everybody who like has that bit of ambition would want to go to some place like MIT or something like that. But I have to be realistic, right? Because because like those places are hard to get into, like harder than Waterloo at least, I guess, or to get into. So I have to make those filters. Like there was like financial filters, there were like my chances of getting in filters, stuff like that. So in the end, my main two like places were main three actually was HKU in particular, Canada and Waterloo specifically because of their co-op program, and Australia. So I got into a bunch of places in Australia, but it was a bit too expensive for us. Then
Can I stop you there for a moment, though? You said
yeah.
something very important, and I want to cover on that. You said something about Waterloo offering a co-op program. Can you elaborate on what is a co-op program?
So the co-op program is basically more or less the same as a usual program, which is like the usual program is 4 years. The co-op is 5 years, but the difference here is that usually how it works here is that like students study during the fall terms, like from September till December, and from January till like April. So 2 terms every year, and the summer is usually off unless you want to take more courses and get ahead. So the co-op program basically gives you the chance of doing mandatory internships in between your courses. So like,
Is it like starting from the very start, or at some point after you've finished your studies? How does that work?
It works in between while you're in school. Like you can kind of decide when you want to start it. There are some people who went on their first internship right after the first term. I personally, since I knew that I probably wouldn't be ready, I was like, all right, let me do as many study terms as I can and get as much information, as much knowledge, and so that I have a better chance in the job market.
So how many co-ops did you have to do? That you say is mandatory within the course.
Right. So like I had the option of doing 6, but I had to do a minimum of 5.
Minimum of 5. So 5 different employers, 5 different internships in different settings.
I mean, we had the choice of going back, which I did once. But yeah, like you can do like 5 different places altogether.
And this is after during the break terms, or is it during the study periods?
So when you're on co-op, like that summer logic doesn't really work anymore. So what happened for us was basically, so my first year was co-op free. I did the usual thing. I did a fall term, I did a winter term, and my summer was off. I went back home for 4 months. In fact, that was the longest time I was home in a while.
All right.
After that, like there was like a 4-month study term, and basically after that summer vacation, it was like 4 months of each term. Like I did 4 months of a study term, 4 months of a co-op, 4 months of a study term. It went on till the time I graduated, basically. So yeah, there was basically no vacations for me after.
So basically what I understand from what you're saying is the co-op is actually part of your course. So it's counted as part of the course.
Yeah, but we get co-ops for our credit. We get credits for our co-ops, and if you don't meet the right amount of credits, we are not eligible to graduate.
So you had to do a minimum of 5. And how long did each of these co-ops?
Each co-ops were like 4 months.
So that would be like 4, 8, 12. It's like 20 months of the program. So a lot of your course was actually spent in real life situations working as an intern. And I think that's brilliant, because at the end of the day, a lot of this theoretical stuff doesn't really work when you get to work in a practical. I mean, you can elaborate if that actually helped, or would you advise people to?
Oh man, it was like the best thing. Like first of all, by the time you graduate, you pretty much have almost 2 years of experience. So you're already ahead of people who are graduating with you.
Yeah.
Then working for different employers, you get a better idea of how like different offices work. I had the luck of like working in companies of all sizes, starting from 20-person startup to like 80,000 people international conglomerate and stuff like that.
And I'm sure you can write all that experience in your CV, and that makes you a much more suitable candidate to get a job in the market.
Exactly. Like I mean, I pretty much had 3 offers waiting for me by the time I graduated. Like I had a job by the time I even sat for my final exams. I just finished my exams, moved to Toronto, and just got to work within a month.
In your case, it seems you didn't have much difficulty, because right after you finished your work, you did get a job, and then you moved on to other works. But what is the general scenario with most of your colleagues who are friends at school who came from Bangladesh or other places? What was the status, or the people around? Is it easy to find job right after you complete your bachelor's?
I mean, like, it's not the hardest thing in the world. Like, it's just a matter of playing your cards right at the end. Uh, obviously the market's getting more competitive, like, bit by bit. But like, if you play your cards right, it's not exactly like that hard. Like, I know some people who didn't do the internships and stuff, and then they just got a job like within maybe like 2-3 months after they graduated, because like, there's a matter of getting more time to like kind of develop yourself and like, be in a better place to like, give out your interviews.
Okay, one thing I want to ask you: a lot of people, when they are, imagining coming to Canada, it's definitely financially challenging. It's expensive, so a lot of them think about coming and working part time here while they're students. So there are two questions I'm asking you, I suppose. First is, what is the average tuition fee? If you don't know about other courses, what is the tuition fee, for instance, in your kind of field,
Right.
studying as a computer science? So how much does it cost in total for the 4 years in tuition? And secondly, if you combine that when you were answering me, um, do students really work, come here, do part-time work and make money and use it, or is it just something that people say that's not doable? Because I understand there has to be a lot of pressure and study
Yeah.
you have to go through. So how practical is it to actually come work and raise money?
I mean, in my perspective, it's probably not practical to do that, but I know countless people who has done so, and like, I really have to give it to them. Like, it's not easy.
Mhm.
It's
Because the
definitely
classes are, I'm sure, engaging. They give you a lot of homeworks and you have to
exactly.
assignments, you have to submit them on time. And on top of that, if you're working 20 hours a week, that sort of,
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely not easy. Like, I don't think I'd be cut out for it properly. Like,
Mhm.
like
So have you worked part-time during your studies
that's well,
or
that's what
during your breaks, summers and things?
my breaks were the co-ops, right? And
Mhm.
the co-ops were the place where I like, pretty much made all the money that I needed to sustain myself.
So they
Like,
actually paid you as well. The internships weren't like free internships.
oh no, and they paid really well. Like, with like, I could pretty much take care of myself completely for like with 4 months of like for 8 months with about four
Mhm.
months of pay. Like, from one internship, I was set for that term and the term after, and not even like, barely. I was like very comfortable. I lived in a nice place, especially when I was in Waterloo. I ate out a lot, and I'd still be fine.
Mhm.
So
So
like,
these co-ops were arranged by the university, the mandatory co-ops. You said like 5, 6 you have to
no,
do,
no.
or you have to go about finding them yourself.
So the university provided support. They had their own job board, and
Hmm.
we could just go. We could arrange our own jobs from the outside, but there was a
Hmm.
job board for us. We
Hmm.
would like, look at the listings there. We would apply. Then the employers would contact us. They would set up
Hmm.
an interview all through the platform. After the interview, there would be like a bit of a ranking system to find the best match. So
Hmm.
like, it was pretty much like the 90% of the whole process was pretty much like finding an actual job.
So it's a very practical process, I'd say, like being able to do that. And you say it pays well as well. Can you give us an estimate about how much they pay to interns?
Like, the minimum is usually like about like in our field, the minimum is something about like 17-18 dollars an hour.
Hmm. That's not actually bad. That's above the minimum wage pay
That's
grade.
much higher, yeah. And like towards the end, you make about like if you're in Toronto or like, somewhere in Canada, you make about like about 33-35 dollars an hour.
So would it be a fair statement to say that the university actually provides a lot of support to the students
Oh,
to find
absolutely,
this,
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
lovely, lovely.
Like, I mean, that's probably like the biggest selling point for the university, like more than having proper teachers and everything. Like,
Hmm.
there were like a lot of courses, like, where we knew that our lecturer was like very skilled at what he's teaching, but there's a difference between knowing something and being able to teach it. Like, I'm probably one of the best examples I know myself. So
Hmm.
like, even though they knew a lot of that stuff, they would maybe sometimes try to explain it in on their level. And
Hmm.
us being like, comparatively like newbies to the whole thing, it would take us a while to get it. We would like, I spent countless hours browsing through YouTube videos and Google to understand the exact concept that was taught in class.
Hmm.
So, it was stuff like that. So it was basically the co-op that really is the difference maker, because
Yep, yep, yep.
and like the university was pretty much there. There were some parts, like, maybe the university like kind of was a bit leaning towards the employers. But even then, like, compared to most other universities I've heard of, at least, like, none provided as much support and as much resources as Waterloo did. Yep.
So would you sort of share the expected cost someone who's planning to come to Canada, say to 2021 at your university or a similar university? How much would he be spending in the 4 years?
Well, so the cost actually increases by a certain percentage every year.
Just a ballpark in terms of.
So places like Waterloo is a bit cheaper among its like, among its class of universities. But even then, like, I think someone should expect to, like, if you're not in co-op, like, I think you should be expecting to spend about 1.5 to 2 lakh taka per month.
How much would that be in dollars? Do you have
about like 15,000? Sorry, 15,000 to $20,000. Like, well, I mean, per 6 months. So basically, about like maybe 40 grand to 50 grand every year.
That includes the accommodation, or you're just talking about the tuition fees?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you have to add the accommodation also.
Yeah. So, how much is that? Give us an idea. Waterloo is not the cheapest of cities. It's sort of expensive. Not as expensive as Toronto, but I suppose its accommodation, everything would be.
Waterloo is actually pretty cheap.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
So, how much do you have to spend a month in terms of your accommodation and other stuff? Like just an average.
Right. So like, I actually stayed in some of the better places in Waterloo. Like, I prefer staying at home a lot. So, like, it makes sense to have a nice place to live in. And I didn't have to spend over $650 for like a very nice room in a nice apartment with my own bathroom and stuff.
Was it like a shared accommodation with other people sharing the? So this is like a private sort of rent you took, not something provided by the university.
No, other than my dorm, it was like private stuff. Yeah.
All right. So that's about $650 a month for sharing for getting the room and using the shared facilities.
Yeah.
And on top of that, like there would be groceries and other kind of expenses, eating out. So what would be a ballpark figure, like just off the top of your head, if I said how much were you spending a month?
So if you're like me and like you wanna eat out every other meal, it'd probably be like $500-600 per month. But if you wanna like save up and everything, I think you can bring it down to like $200-300 per month, even less maybe.
300 for food?
Yeah, per month. Yeah.
So we got like 600 for the accommodation and 300 for the food, and then there will be other expenses. So yeah, let's say $1,200-1,300 minimum a month. That's what you're spending.
Yeah, 1,000 to 1,200 ish, something like that would be safe. That would be more than enough, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I know you haven't worked, but if somebody's working part time, let's say at a minimum wage job, at a coffee shop or something like that, then he should be able to basically raise these 1,200. So if he can bring the tuition fees from home, and if he says, okay, I'll work 20 hours per week, he should be able to get by and live on his own.
Yeah, I mean, if you make like an average of like $12 an hour, then like and if you work 20 hours a week, so you get roughly about.
I think the minimum wage now is what, 14?
Oh, right, it's 14. It's actually
14,
more.
Yeah, it's actually
14
more.
to 20 is 280, and if you have 4 weeks, then you make about almost $1,200 per month.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you need to.
Yeah, and you're just considering like just the fixed salary part, their tips and stuff like
other
that.
Things.
Like it's not easy. It's definitely not easy. Don't get me wrong, but it's possible.
So I forgot to ask you one question. So when you were applying from Bangladesh and to come here, the whole process can seem daunting. I mean, now we're here, we know the process, everything looks fun and dandy, it's easy. I'm sure it looked complicated, applying to universities, going through the visa process. Oh, yes. How did you go about doing it? Did you do it on your own, or did you get some kind of help from anyone?
So for the application process, it was more or less like me doing what I needed to do. Like if I had to go to my school to pick up some mark sheets and stuff like that, my parents definitely helped me out on that. But otherwise, the application process wasn't too bad. Like the university portals were pretty easy to handle. Like,
so you searched, you applied, and you got all the offer letters and everything on your own?
More or less, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Did you
like
consult any professional agencies or other kinds of service providers who
for
consult
certain,
on education?
for Waterloo, no. For Australia, I basically was introduced to it by a friend of my dad's, who pretty much thought that he could get me into a good place with a nice scholarship and stuff. But
But for
other,
Canada, you did it entirely on your own.
yeah, basically my friends, like our
Yeah.
friends discussed it. Like I
Yeah.
already had a friend who went,
Mm-hmm.
so I talked a bit with him. Some friends who are here, like I talked to them about finances and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So like, yeah, as far as, but the actual application process for the university, it was pretty much me just putting the right bits of information in the right place. So
Yeah.
that was the easy part. Actually, I got my application like about, I think, 2 months after that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it was the visa that was the most scary part,
Like,
because
why would you say it's scary?
over there you had no point of contact, like no proper point of contact. And from what I've heard from people who went before me, who, like, that it's a very, like, it's a very unknown process. It could go either ways.
Yeah, I understand the uncertainty, especially from that end, from when you're applying from Bangladesh and you don't know what's the process.
Right.
Now, when we look at this end, from here, because I'm in the field of immigration, I'm sort of studying, looking up the laws and everything. Now, from this end, we can understand the methodology or the grammar behind it. But I can understand as a student, when you're applying, it would be scary because you don't want to go through the entire process, get accepted everywhere,
Right.
and then have your visa rejected. Anyway, I had so much more questions to ask you, but we have sort of run out of time. In fact, we've run past the time. So maybe I'll invite you as a guest again someday to discuss, because there's so much I couldn't ask you. But this was lovely. It was lovely sort of discussing, having a chat with you. And I'm sure those students who are looking forward to come to Canada will find this video useful. I mean, we have discussed a lot of important stuff here.
Yeah, I hope it does. I mean, like, it seems a bit daunting, but I mean, if you just play your cards right and play it smart, like, it's not as complicated as it seems.
Lovely, lovely. I'm sure we'll get to know more about that maybe some other day. And
Yeah.
I'm sure you're working from home, so I wish you all the very best with everything. And on that note, I bid you farewell.